Hello everyone, Patrik here. Today I'd like to talk about something that's dear to my heart, the issue of safety on the water, safety while kayaking specifically. So obviously kayaking is a great sport, it's a lot of fun, and for the most part it's all good times out there. But accidents can happen and they can be prevented by the right knowledge, the right gear, the right preparedness, and the right mindset. So it's really important for any kayaker to be aware of their surroundings, of potential risks, of things that could happen, and ways to avoid those pitfalls. And part of that is obviously having, as we said, the right gear. Part of it is being prepared for different situations that could arise on the water. And part of it is training and practice, preferably in the water. So today, I'd like to show some of the basic safety gear that I carry with me when I'm out paddling. Obviously, the gear that I bring along depends a lot on the circumstances, the weather, the season, where I'm paddling, the risks that are specific for that exact trip. And some of this gear I carry around all the time, some of this gear I carry around only sometimes. And it might not be exactly right for you, but some of these things are pretty basic and good for everyone to know about. I'm not claiming that this is the absolute truth of safety gear, certainly not. It's just some things that I like to bring along to make sure that I and others around me are safe on the water. So let's take a look at the gear and see what I normally bring with me on a trip. So one thing to mention is that what I'm presenting today is based on the gear I use for inflatable kayaks. In this case, a fast inflatable kayak that behaves almost like a sea kayak, the Itiwit X500. But some gear will obviously be additionally needed for example, a sea kayak, depending on its qualities and whatever type of kayak it is. In any case, many of these features will be universal for most kayakers. Okay. So some of the gear I carry on me, it depends obviously, as we said, on the trip. I might carry relatively little gear if I'm paddling in the middle of the city, close to shore. I might carry considerably more safety gear if I'm paddling in the archipelago or for multiple days. But here are some basics. So obviously, first of all, the right clothing for the weather you're in. That's a whole different video, that's a whole different discussion, but proper clothing, be prepared for rain, for example, cap to protect against the sun, sunglasses if you need them. And here's one tip that I've learned the hard way while stand-up paddleboarding. If you were unlucky enough to fall into the water, having one of these to help fix your glasses, if you wear glasses, is a really good idea. So if you fall, well, your glasses stay on. All right, so one of the first things, obviously, is your PFD, your personal flotation device. Really important to have one, preferably a life jacket, even if there are other solutions, but a life jacket that fits you well, that is properly adjusted, the straps are correctly set, and that you know is classified for your weight level and fits you snugly and comfortably. It's something that's a good idea to actually try out in the water. So just jump into the water, try the life jacket, swim around with it, and see that it actually fits well, functions well, or if you need to adjust the straps and such. Another thing is the visibility. If you're in the water, there might be other vessels, fast motorboats, jet skis, what have you. And one thing that you hear from these guys is that kayakers can be quite hard to see on the water. So unfortunately, that's something we need to consider. So I usually prefer, if I'm in an environment like that, where there might be traffic on the water, for safety, I prefer to wear high visibility colors of some sort, maybe a cap that actually adds visibility, and or a life jacket that actually does that. So basically, this is what I carry around in my PFD. The basic stuff that's kind of a universal piece of advice is this guy, the whistle. in case you were to get into some kind of emergency situation, you are able to call for help if you're carrying this around and it's available close by. So something you can reach for at any moment. What I tend to carry around is not one, but several actually. But this little guy, for example, is a quick compass. Gives me a basic direction sense. I also have a more advanced compass available for when I'm looking at maps and such. For navigation, obviously not needed if I'm paddling around in some creek near where I live, but if I'm out in the archipelago, that could be quite important. Then basically, one thing that we might get into is that you're not always in these conditions. You're not always out in daylight. You might want to be in darker conditions, in which case a light on your life jacket, on your kayak, or whatever it is, might be really important. This particular model is called an Arbilock. It's helpful in the sense that if you were to end up in the water, it's dark, and you need to actually let rescuers find you. It has this kind of blinking emergency light, or you can just use it as a general light to make you more visible to other vessels on the water. One other thing that can be really useful is to have some sort of cutting tool. Either I carry this, which is specific for cutting lines in case you were to get entangled in something, which is not unusual in kayaking. I also tend to carry in my life vest a more sturdy pocket knife, while many kayakers actually carry a proper kayak knife, which is longer and more immediately accessible. And obviously we should mention one of the most important things. You need to be able to call for help if something were to happen. One key thing there is obviously your mobile phone, and having that waterproof pouch, a watertight pouch of some sort, is really important. Also keeping your cell phone not in some bag packed away securely at the back of your kayak, but somewhere where you can reach it immediately, which is really on your life jacket. So that's key, and forgetting that waterproof pouch might cost you your phone. So remember that always. One gadget that isn't crucial in any way, shape or form, but which I find interesting and helpful, that I've started using recently, is this guy, an anemometer. So that's basically for measuring wind, and it actually shows the temperature as well. So if I'm out there, and obviously I get a general sense of how strong the wind is and what that means for my kayak safety, but if I really want to get the hard data, this actually is not too expensive and gives me a good idea. So that's it. Some of the key gear is obviously available right here on the kayak. One good idea, depending on how you're paddling and where you're paddling, if you're, for example, on a long expedition, might be a good idea to have a spare paddle in case you had bad luck and actually break a paddle or damage it. All right, so one key piece of gear right here is your paddle leash. So essentially having something that connects the paddle to either your PFD or to the kayak. That is pretty critical. In case you were to lose it, it doesn't float away in the water. You don't need to chase it. It stays with the kayak or yourself. I prefer personally to keep it attached to the kayak, so that if it gets stuck, for example, in a current, in rocks or between rocks or whatever, it doesn't drag me with it. It stays with the kayak rather than entangles myself. So that's one piece of key gear. The other is this, a paddle float, which you would attach to your paddle. And after inflating it, you basically attach it to your paddle, again, inflating this so that it provides extra flotation in the water. That gives you stabilization, and obviously when you try to re-enter, then you have extra support right there. So this can be really helpful if you're in difficult water. And if you were unlucky enough to actually have a wave swamp your kayak, or you flipped and you have water in your kayak, then this guy, the bilge pump, is really, really useful in order to get water out of there. Something that might be used rarely, but when you need it, it's really, really important, really, really helpful. I've used it a couple of times. I've been really happy I brought it along. And this is a useful complement to that. Just a basic sponge that you can use to wipe out small water drops or small amounts of water that end up in your kayak. So those in combination are really helpful. So another really important piece of gear is, of course, a spray deck, which you attach to the cockpit of the kayak, around the coaming, around the cockpit of the kayak, which keeps you dry and safe from rain or from waves splashing over. Really critical if you are in a little bit of heavier weather or chop. So one thing to always remember is that the handle of the spray skirt needs to be obviously not stuck under the spray skirt where you can't reach it, but within reach. So if you flip and you need to get out of the kayak quickly, you're able to just pull it and off you go. One other really good thing to try in advance of your pedals is to see whether you are able to use your knees to open the spray skirt as well. That's a good trick in case you can't reach the handle in a tricky situation. And that worked. Another piece of gear that I use on some occasions is this, a towing rope, a rescue rope essentially, which essentially is a resource in case you were to need to throw a helping lifeline to someone in the water, or in case you actually need to tow another kayaker who's in trouble. I did that some time ago, actually, with a friend who, well, wasn't in an emergency, but actually had cramps, and it was more convenient at the time to use that as a little bit of practice and provide a little bit of extra comfort, and use the towing line to tow the other kayak. Worked for almost a kilometer without any issue. I imagine for a number of kilometers that would get heavier, but that's a really helpful tool to have. So this is something I bring along on paddles where I think it might be potentially useful. It's been useful a few times. And in addition, a bonus is that on a recent camping trip out in the archipelago, this rope was extremely helpful in securing the dry bag, which was left in the water with all the cool beverages inside. So that's another use case right there. Okay, so obviously I tend to bring a little bit of extra gear to be used in actual emergencies. So in the storage space of my kayak, whatever that might be, I always bring dry bags that are waterproof and will provide gear that's dry and available in case something happens. So one key thing obviously is your change of clothes. So in case you were to end up in the water or you need additional clothing because the weather is getting really cold, then having extra clothes safely stowed away with you is really critical in that situation, obviously. So one dry bag typically I bring for that. I personally have learned after a lot of kayaking trips that keeping track of all that gear is a little bit tricky. So I tend to color code some gear. At least I usually always use orange for my emergency dry bag. So while there might be other things here, it usually always contains a few emergency items. So I quickly and easily can find it. So first thing is very naturally a first aid kit. In this case, this is a waterproof first aid kit as well. So this is something I can count on to be available for anything from cuts and scrapes to more serious injuries. Really important. I usually bring an emergency blanket, which is a heating blanket that basically will provide heat for someone who's cold after falling into the water. Maybe it's myself, maybe it's a co-paddler. These don't take a lot of space, so often I bring 2 of these in case I'm paddling with another person. While on that topic, this is one piece of more advanced gear that I certainly don't bring along for every paddle, but if I'm expedition paddling or paddling in heavy weather where there's a risk that I or someone I'm paddling with could get stranded in rough weather, for example, and let's say we get blown in by heavy wind unexpectedly and we have to go on shore and actually stay for the night, maybe in heavy wind and cold weather. Then what I use is this. All right, this doesn't weigh much, but I feel is a useful resource. It's an emergency tent that can fit, in this case, up to 2 people. And I've never had to use it in real life, but I've become more and more aware of that there are certainly situations where you could imagine yourself being stranded unexpectedly, perhaps with a co-paddler or yourself that is really cold and wet from having fallen into the water. Let's say the wind has picked it up, maybe there's even snow or rain, and you really need shelter from the elements. So this is actually a little bit of extra safety. Reassuring to have that in your pack as well. Not needed in most situations, but in certain circumstances, I wouldn't want to be without this. We have this, which is a snap light. This is just a light stick that I imagine I could be using to essentially call for help in certain situations. Some paddlers use flares and things. This is what I carry around. But something that also doesn't weigh much, doesn't take a lot of space, and is easy to keep in an emergency pack. So even if I've forgotten it, it's gonna be there if I need it. Wise from recent experience, I actually had the bad luck recently of hitting an underwater rock and actually getting a puncture in the bottom of one of my inflatable kayaks. I did try to use tape that I had brought, duct tape essentially, to emergency repair it. There is a repair kit for almost every inflatable kayak, but often that will take a long time to stay on. The glue and such needs to dry for an extended period of time, which you might not have time for in the immediate situation. So the duct tape I tried to use in the repair situation then, it stayed on for about 30 minutes and then it came loose. So now I use this Gorilla tape, which is even stronger and something that I hope not to have to use, but at least good to have. All right, so one additional really important thing is in case of night paddling, in case of paddling in the dark, that is a situation where you might not always plan for kayaking after dark, but you could get delayed or stranded or for whatever reason actually ending up paddling later than you thought. And in that case, bringing proper lighting along can obviously be very, very important. So I already mentioned this that I keep on my life jacket, which provides some lighting and warning towards other vessels on the water. What I tend to use as well is this. It's called a Navi light. And there are obviously many different solutions, but this is something which can shine omnidirectional, have an emergency setting or a more economic setting. And this is something that I would fix to the kayak and make sure that I'm visible after dark towards other vessels. That's really critical. And obviously, in addition to that, I might need to actually see where I'm going. Usually in the dark, if it's not enormously dark and if there are not immediate obstacles in the water, I might use my own eyes actually to navigate. But in many cases, you're closer to shore, there might be rocks, etc., etc. Then I might use a headlight in order to light up the surroundings around me, or after the paddling trip to actually be able to see all my gear as I'm packing up my kayak and all my gear. Again, with the color coding, I tend to have a small yellow dry bag for electronics, not just lighting, but also a power bank and charger cable for my phone or other gear, so that in case I run out of battery, I have extra resources for that. And waterproofed. Finally, one additional small item that usually isn't needed, but sometimes it's really helpful, is a screwdriver. So a screwdriver can be really useful, for example, if you need to tighten the screws on your paddle, which could come loose over time and you might not have noticed. So that's something I bring as well. All right, so those were a few tips. Obviously, there are many other items I might not have mentioned, and many of these items you might not use every day or on only select occasions. So I use my safety gear depending on the situation, and safety adequate for the situation, safety in reasonable moderation, but it's always better to be on the safe side than to be sorry. So I'm hoping that this has been helpful. It's certainly not the absolute truth on what kayaking safety gear you should bring, but I'm hoping this can be a little bit of an inspiration. And for all of those that have ideas or questions or know much more than I do, then certainly feel free to jump in with comments or suggestions or questions in the comment section below. And I'm hoping this might be helpful. I've learned a lot throughout my paddles, and I'm happy to share and discuss, and I'm still learning. So that's it. I wish you happy and safe paddles. Stay safe out there, and good luck. Enjoy your kayaking. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe in order to help others find the information on this channel. Stay safe out there and happy paddles!